Welcome to Victorious Souls podcast with me, your host, Danielle Burnock, that lady on the internet who loves you, connecting you to the love that heals so you can love yourself from survive to thrive. And today I have a guest I'm really excited about because I'm that lady on the internet who loves you, and he's got a whole tool revolving around love. So I'm pretty excited about that. He's a childhood trauma survivor who overcame through the power of love, and he's an international best-selling author of The Role of Love. It's ROLE, Role of Love, and the creator of a new application of the love languages. Thank you for being with me today, Paul. Paul Zolman, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation, Danielle. Glad to be here.
I'm excited. As I was saying in the introduction, your whole thing is about love, and that is the core of all that I do. So I'm really excited to get into this conversation with you. So before we get into all the wonderfulness, let's give us a little bit of your backstory of that childhood trauma. What happened growing up and your story?
Thank you, Danielle. I'll do that. I just wanted to know that love actually emanates from your countenance. I can see you really have a bright face, and just fun to be with you. Thanks so much again.
Thank you.
I want to start out with just a little bit about my ancestry. I had a grandfather on the Zolman side. His last name's Zolman, that lived in Indiana, and he actually had 9 children. This is late 1800s. Had 9 children, and then his wife passed away, unfortunately, in the early 1900s. So this grandfather, being so distressed and distraught about that death of his wife, thought he'd sell the farm and wanted a new beginning. But as people came for the auction, they came for the equipment, they came for the land, they came for everything. He would say, "Would you like this child? Would you like this child? Would you like this child?" Until all the children were gone except one, Benjamin. Benjamin was probably about 10, 12 years old. He took Benjamin with him to Montana, found my grandmother, married my grandmother, had 10 more children, of which my father was number 6.
Why did he keep one?
I don't know. We don't even know that part of the story, and we don't really even know what happened to Benjamin, because I only know about the siblings of my father at that time. But when my father was 10 years old, that grandfather passed away. So here you have 9 children in Indiana, 10 children in Montana, all abandoned all of a sudden. Obviously, death is not a purposeful abandonment on purpose,
Right.
but still, excuse me, still an abandonment.
Mm-hmm.
With that, my father was born in 1922. So the year that his father passed away is 1932. Remember what's going on in the 1930s in this nation.
The Depression.
Horrible depression. So there's economic stress. There's a lot of stresses around. Excuse me, I'm sorry. With that stress comes a lot of anger. There comes a lot of distress, a lot of pressure that is put on the individuals. My father never graduated from high school. He felt so impressed that he had to work. He had to go to work after 8th grade. So he had an 8th grade education. He learned how to be a mechanic and did that. And then he decided he was going on a trip, went to Spokane for some reason or other, met my mother, and then they married. And they went back to Glendive, Montana, and settled there. Had 11 children, of which I'm number 10 of 11 children. Big families, and then when I was 5, they moved from Glendive to Great Falls, Montana, and that's where I was raised. And even in Great Falls, though, things were still really stressful. I remember one thing really good about my father. I remember that he dated my mother every single Friday night. It was like clockwork, and it's something I really respect about him. There was nothing going to get in the way of him and my mother having their date Friday night.
What a beautiful part to have in the story, like a beautiful thread. That's wow.
It was a beautiful thread. The problem was that it was always the same venue, and it was not the greatest venue. It was the Maverick Bar. It was over alcohol, and in that imbibed state, my mother would disclose what happened through the week, as you would normally. That would be the normal course of any parental relationship. that they disclose one to another what happened with your week, what happened with your week, and it just happened like that.
Mhm.
Mostly it was about the kids with my mother, I'm sure, and I wasn't ever there, of course, but what we found out was whether he was in a good mood after that or a bad mood. If it was a
Mm,
bad mood, we'd either get the belt or a spanking. And if it
mhm.
was a good mood, we might be able to spend some time with him on that Saturday. So that was the weekend. That was it. I remember one time actually being, it was one, I must have done something terrible, but because I was black and blue on my rear for more than 3 weeks. I mean, it was a
Wow.
severe spanking that left me black and blue for that long period of time. It was so traumatic for me at that time. I had a
Yeah.
a little 2-inch pocket knife that when you opened it up had like a 1-inch blade. And I thought, this is it. I've just got to get out of here. And I put the point of the blade to right to my heart and thought, you know what? This hurts just putting the point there.
Yeah.
Didn't even pierce the skin. It just hurt putting the point there. And I thought, if I push it in, I'm gonna get in trouble and I'm gonna get another spanking. And so I just talked myself out of it and then just
Wow.
cried myself to sleep. And I remember I never tried that ever again because I just understood that if I did anything to hurt or if I was out of line, I knew what was coming. And it was
Mm,
really a strict environment in that way. So strict that I remember in high school taking a test for what my interest would be for an occupation. It
mhm.
came out that I would be a great IRS agent because I was so strict to those rules. And
Yeah.
and and I would punish people. That's what IRS agents do. They give you these little fees, and I had the punitive atmosphere. I was trained to be
Yeah.
like that, and
Yeah.
it's just interesting that my disposition at such a young age was very similar to my father. That punitive type of disposition. I
Mm,
didn't like. I really didn't like it. So at age 17, decided I'd move out.
mm,
I moved, went in with my brother. He lived down in the Salt Lake City area, not in Salt Lake, but in one of the suburbs there. Moved in with him, and 6 months later, his company transferred him to California. So I did my senior year kind of on the road, so to
mm.
speak. The Montana schools were a lot harder. Utah were a little easier. California was just a kind of a joke. I don't mean that demeaningly, but it just wasn't working for me. I was there 3 weeks and then just tested out, took the GED, and then I was done. And then I worked for a year before I went to Japan for a couple of years. And then so in this time period, I'm trying to watch for examples of goodness. I'm watching, and my brother was a great example. He had a few children, and he was just a really good father, just a really good provider, and just really, really kind, except he still had the flashes. So what would happen was that we'd be annoyed, we'd be annoyed again, and we'd annoyed again, and then we flash. And so it just kind of stacks up one on top of another.
Wow.
And that's kind of how the annoyances has happened. So take that, fast forward a little bit, double my age. I'm 35 years old. I'm finally realized that, huh, I'm responsible for my own life. Before that, I was blaming my father for any relationships that went wrong, any other things that went wrong in my life. I was blaming my father all about those things, regardless. The bad thing about that is that at age 35, he'd been dead 7 years.
Wow.
So he was not even here to defend himself.
So you
About
were in your 20s when he passed?
20, yeah, about 28, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He passed away on his 65th birthday.
Mm.
And it was just, there was a lot of regrets there. I always used to call him, but at the time, his olden days, the phone was on the wall, connected to the wall. There were no cell phones. You couldn't text or anything like that. And I
Mhm,
was at work. So it was
mhm.
at work. I couldn't use that phone. I didn't want the long distance charges to be, and a lot of people aren't even going to understand this whole dialogue here. So,
Yeah, well, we could pause and bring our listeners in. Back in the olden days, like they say, I grew up in somewhat of the same time frame as yours. The telephone hung on the wall. They were called landline. People have heard of the term landline, but we would have to pay extra for long distance we'd have to pay extra for international, where some cell phone carriers still do things different with the international. And at the beginning of the cell phones, we used to have to buy minutes. So there's been a big progression in our communication culture.
So such was the day that my father passed away. I knew it was his birthday. I thought about early morning giving him a call, and just thought I've got to get to work, and I'm at work. I don't have a phone with me. Obviously, there was no such thing at the time. So if I was going to make a call, it was on the business phone, and that would have been using the company's money. Just really was not a good idea. So I didn't call. But then at work in the afternoon of that day, I got a call that he had passed away, and it was just heartbreaking that
Yeah,
he'd passed away on his birthday,
yeah.
65th birthday. Didn't even get to collect a dime from Social Security at all, ever. So
Was
that
he
was
sick, or did he die suddenly?
he passed away. At age 59, he had been working on a semi trailer. He was a truck driver, so he was working as a semi trailer, and it was in a storm apparently, and a live wire uh, uh, line came down and electrified the trailer, and he was just being jolted off. So to avoid that, he actually grabbed onto the wire. So he had burn marks on all his fingertips where the electricity, 12,000 volts of electricity went through him, and then burn marks on his toes where it came out. So when he passed away, it's probably easier to count on one hand what parts were good inside him than what was bad. But I mean, he came back a little bit, but then it just died in the hospital at the very end, and it was just
So
really
he was
sad.
in the hospital for 6 years.
No,
You
no,
said
just
at 59, he was,
right. But just at the very end, he came back, was rehabilitated for quite some for the sick
oh,
most
okay.
years, and then just got sick.
Oh,
Just got sick, and his lungs filled up, and it just didn't work. Anyway, so at age 35, I started thinking, what is there that I need to change in my life? What is there to do? And during all this time, I was raised in a church, raised to be a church going person, had actually gone to church. I thought I was a really good boy. So to get that spanking and be black and blue for 3 weeks,
oh yeah, that would have a different level of trauma to it.
yes,
That you're trying so hard to do the right thing, and then you're getting punished for that. I mean, that's a whole different kind of trauma at
yeah.
another layer. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah. So anyway, I was trying to do the right thing, and so as a practice, we had scripture reading in the morning as a family, and so we were reading from the Bible one day, and my 3-year-old was sitting on my wife's lap. All of a sudden, he just got rambunctious and waved his hands like this, and just flicked off my wife's glasses, and I slapped him, and I thought, oh, this is terrible. I felt so bad about slapping him that on my way to work, and cell phones were in style then. On, on my, on my way on my way to work, I called the Department of Social Services, reported myself. They weren't even in the office yet. So I left a message that said I lost it. I slapped my son. They didn't even call me back. They went
Wow.
to the house. They said your husband can't come home. So I couldn't see the children. I couldn't go home, and I had to just make arrangements. And they actually charged me with child abuse. So, so I
I mean,
called.
let's just pause here for a minute. I just want to pause here for you and I and for our listeners, because the way you and I grew up with the kind of abuse that people thought was normal behavior back in the day, I want to draw the contrast here. You were beaten black and blue for 3 weeks, and that was considered normal in many situations back then. Here you just slapped your child, not to make it right, but you slapped them and you're charged with child abuse. I mean, the contrast of those behaviors are pretty stark. So I just want to draw a picture here. It's like, any one of you listening, if you have been through any kind of abuse, please don't belittle what happened to you. If you weren't treated properly, it wasn't right. I don't care how slight off it was. We don't need to go arresting people unless that's necessary. That's not my point. My point is for you who are listening to own the truth. Validate the truth of the trauma or the abuse that you have endured so you can move forward and heal, like our wonderful friend Paul here. Continue, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. Think of the contrast there, though. Here we are sitting at the dining room table, reading from the good book, and now that comes up that I'm slapping them. So there's abuse, and then we're trying to get the good word, and it's just the conflict there is probably more
Yes.
complicated than anything else that I have to say. It was
Yes.
just a complex situation, and it really was hard. I pled guilty because I did not want my children, my family to be taken through the courthouse and through all that and through all the garbage that happens that way. And so I was basically sentenced pretty quickly, and I was sentenced to 18 months probation, and in addition to that, a full year of anger management. So when I'm going to these anger management class, I have to go 40 miles north. I lived in a very small town, 40 miles north and 40 miles back. And so it's a drive. Plus, I had to pay every week. I had to go every week. I had to pay every single week a fee for the class. And while I'm at those classes, these are people that did not, unlike me, they did not volunteer that they had been abusive. They were caught. They were absolutely caught. In fact, one guy had his wife by the neck, feet off the ground, up against the wall until she passed out. That was his domestic abuse. And then another guy beat his wife really badly, and that's why he was there. And they got caught doing that. I had volunteered the information, left, unfortunately, I guess, but fortunately in some ways, but unfortunately left it on as a message on the answer machine. That was their evidence against me, is my own confession that way of what I did. I was asking for help. That's the kind of help that they offered.
Okay.
Really wasn't exactly what I was expecting, but but it worked. So
it intercepted the situation. It intercepted the situation.
Exactly.
So you were successful.
So this class was very interesting, and it went through a whole array of abuses, 13 or 14 different types of abuses that they had on this wheel. And I was appalled at myself that I was taught so many of those types of abuse. I had no idea that it was abuse. And even the listeners right now, if they knew all the different types of abuse out there and learned about that, they would correct their path. They would change course right now, as I did. So but what I did outside of the class, well, let me back up. In the class, you had to write down different things of how you felt and what you did. And as you're writing these things out, all these other guys that had been put in through the court system as well had got more penalties. They were stacking it up because here they are writing in a class and making more confessionals of other abuses that they'd made, and it just piled on the evidence for them to get worse sentences. It was just the most horrible thing I've ever seen in my whole life, really. That it was after the fact, after they had been convicted, after they'd been sentenced, now they're looking for more information to continue that and make it go further. It was awful. But for me, what I did when I went home, I thought, how can I not do that particular abuse if I was doing it? I'd done them in my life, but I didn't have anything consistent that I was doing. What I found out is that if I looked to the opposite, I could get a spectrum. Take for example, just the word sarcasm. Sarcasm, if you let me just kind of illustrate it this way. So I went outside walking the other day and I found this stick. This stick on one, it didn't have any bark on it when I found it. So on this side, it's really nice, a great place for your hand and everything. But on the other side of the stick, just little points and pricks, and where there could have been branches, but it's kind of a knotty side of the stick. So this is naughty, and nice stick. Consider that as a spectrum. I'm sure Santa Claus has a stick just like that. So this is the spectrum. Anger and these abusive type of behaviors were all on the naughty side of the stick.
Mhm.
When you think of that, you think of it's a culture, it's a vocabulary, it's a nuance, it's a mannerism, it's the humor. Everything involved is a culture of the angry or naughty side of the stick.
Mm.
In contrast, there's the love languages and the loving actions and the loving words and the loving humor, the kind humor that just doesn't hurt you, just funny. And it's just on the other side of the stick. When what brought this to the point was that I was dating about 15 years ago, and I was dating someone, a neighbor of my sister, and it was time to take her up for Big Brother approval. When you're number 10 of 11, you always have to have Big Brother approval, always. So I was taking her up for Big Brother approval, take her in, and as soon as I came in the door, sister-in-law took her aside and said, the only emotion that the Zolman family learned growing up is anger. At first I didn't know. I said, and it made me mad. Then I thought, if that's true, and it felt like she nailed it, if that's true, I have an opportunity here to change the course. I thought that I'd fixed it with all the anger management I went through and everything. I thought that was done with that. But the curse, so to speak, of what my childhood was about still was following me. I wanted that to end. So I started reading the color code, started reading the 5 love languages, and just tried to incorporate that into my life. I love the principles because those principles of the love languages, every one of them apply to the life of Jesus Christ. We love the words. Words is part of those love languages. We love the service that he did, several stories of the service. We love the gifts of the Spirit that he had, all that. We love that he touched to heal, touched the blind so they could see, touched the leper so the leper would be healed, touched Mary, or had to tell Mary. We know touch was part of his ministry because he had to tell Mary, touch me not, until he ascended to the Father. So we know all that was I forgot one, didn't I? Did I say time? Spend time with others. So he spent time as well. So he used all 5 love languages, and Dr. Gary Chapman is the one that really highlighted this, that he reconciled to the life of Jesus Christ. I liked that. I really liked that. It resonated with me. But reading the 5 love languages 4 or 5 times, I didn't get it. Just did not get how to apply it. You mean, Danielle, I'm supposed to guess what your love language is and then cater to that? I'm a bad guesser, really bad guesser. It's not going to happen. It was just so a shot in the dart or a throw in the dart to the wall. It just wasn't going to happen. And then the second application Dr. Chapman had for me was, well, if you take this survey, I can find out what my love language is. Then what? What do? Advertise? Hello, Danielle, I'm gifts. What do you have for me today? Oh, awkward.
Can you imagine? Hello, nice to meet you. My love language is gifts. When can I expect my first one?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, you get it. You get
Or
it.
physical touch or something, because some people are like, they're what I call space people. They're like, they have this like little force field around them. They don't want you touching them, and
So
we need to honor and respect that. So it's that happens at churches a lot, where some churches they shake hands or hug, and someone comes in and they don't want to be hugged, and it becomes this real weird awkward thing. So how did you apply this? How did you bridge this gap from I don't know how to do this to what you're doing now?
So yeah, that's another good one. Hello, I'm Touch. When can we have a session or something like that? It's a little awkward. Awkward.
Yes.
So the transition for me really was that I thought, you know what? I have an idea. Even though we had a traumatic childhood, we played games together as a family. Another good memory, in addition to the memory of my father taking my mother out every Friday. So we played games, and we didn't play often, but we played often enough that I liked them. So I thought, maybe what if I gamified this? What if I just made this whole love language thing a game? Then I could learn it. Then I could understand. So after reading 4 or 5 times the book, 5 love languages, I could not name them. I could never, I couldn't even spit them out. If you paid me $500,000, I couldn't spit all 5 out. And I was dead, no trash. It wasn't part of me. So I contacted Dr. Chapman and said, would you license those icons? And thankfully he said no, because they're kind of ugly. They're dated, is what it is. They're just 30 years old, and they're back. It's the United Way rainbow on the hand type of thing. It was just wasn't working.
I don't remember what they look like, but I remember struggling identifying what one I was. I took that test, like you said, he has a test for that. I took that test, and depending on my mood of what it would come up with, like, well, none of them really fit. And then I discovered that my trauma was in the way of me owning the truth, just like your trauma was in the way of you owning the truth about anger. Mine is acts of service, but I thought that that meant that I was trying to get everybody to do everything for me. And it's like, no, it's not supposed to be like that. So, yeah.
Well, it kind of is. If your service, you want your car washed, and you want the floor vacuumed, you want the windows washed, you want the dishes done, you want all that because your service, that's what you like. And
but it can also be something as simple as getting you a cup of coffee when your coffee cup is empty, and happen to notice that. And, oh, would you like another cup of coffee? It doesn't have to be anything huge and overt. And I learned that through Danny Silk's book, Loving Your Kids on Purpose. That book is the one who helped me with the love languages, because I struggled with them like you did.
So this is what I did after I got that letter from Dr. Chapman's attorney saying no, they're not licensing those icons. I went to a local attorney in my town, and he's an intellectual property attorney, and he said that theory is not copyrightable, application is. So I was going to make it a game. I could have my own icons. I could make it into a game. So that's basically what I did. So I made it into a game. It's just a simple game. I put the icons that I made on a die. So there's the time, service, the words, touch, gifts, and there's 6 sides on the dice. So this last side is surprise me. So there's just 2 instructions. You roll the die every day. That's the love language you practice all day that day. And I might want to interject right here that I was single when I created this. And so this works for everybody. I did not, like Dr. Chapman suggested, have a significant other. And to me, as I thought about it, that if I only practice to a significant other, it's like part-time. And part-time work, well, if I'm not at home and I'm going to work, well, I'm not practicing love at work. And then when I come home, I'll forget that I'm supposed to be practicing love over here. And it was confusing again, confusing. So the direction of it just really, really didn't work for me. The consistency of it didn't work for me. So I thought, because I'm single, I've got to just do it to everybody. I can't be discriminating. I've got to love everyone, just like you do, Danielle. You love everyone. That's why you have your podcast.
That's one of the reasons, yes. I want to pause here for a second, because we skipped something in your story. And I think it may be important for people to know. It's like you were married and you had kids and you had this anger management, and then all of a sudden you're single. So you went from married with kids to single. So what happened? Was it because you turned yourself in that you lost your marriage because of that? Or did something happen later? Or
so there was absolutely stress about that incident, and it ended up compromising our whole relationship, so that after 23 and a half years, we did divorce.
23 and a half years is so long.
Yeah, it was a long time, and we had eight children, and my wife was still very beautiful, and she said she was probably 43-ish, 44 maybe at the time. She was going back to college, and she was telling the college kids that she was 28 and getting away with it.
Why?
Well, you can figure out why. And then she just started liking them and liking their association, more than me, and just fell apart.
Oh, so it wasn't all because of what happened. She kind of went through a looking for love in different places herself.
So it could have been started from
Oh,
my
right. I'm not saying it that wasn't a part of the story at
previously,
all, but yeah.
and hurt feelings that were carried on, and this was kind of a backlash that way. Yeah, it could have been that. And I'm
And
not
you said you have 8 children.
eight.
Are you still in contact with your children?
I did. Yeah, most of them, a few of them decide they want to be little hermits, and they've gone their own route, but then they don't communicate. But most of them do.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So then did you practice this with your kids, or you said you were confused because you couldn't do this at
So
work and at home when you were single? So how did it turn into
yeah,
what it
so
is?
no, this was so all the children were gone. By the time I created this, and we did skip a lot of the story, but just wanted to fast forward a little bit. By the time I created this, I was single, all the children were gone. When I divorced from my first wife, I actually had the 5 children because she wanted to do that particular lifestyle. And then about 3.5 years after the divorce, she wanted the remaining children, there were 3 left, she wanted them back, and she had them until they actually became adults. So during the time she had them, I was by myself, and that's when I created this this solution. It actually works as a solution for me. So the whole idea, Danielle, of rolling the die every single day gave me a focus, and it was totally a different focus. As I'd mentioned before, that the way I would flash or get angry was I'd have one annoyance on top of another annoyance on top of another annoyance, top of another annoyance until it flashed. And then it was just pile up until it flashed. What annoyed me though was what other people were doing, what they're doing wrong, and just the things that bother you from time to time. It could have been children, it could have been my wife, it could have been anybody that would be bothering you. Instead, what this diet did for me is that it gave me a new mindset. It says, what's right with that person? What can I love about that person?
Yeah.
And I was so busy, Danielle, watching for those things that I had zero time and zero disposition to even go, what's wrong with that person? And then go down that critical route again. Because once you decide what's wrong with that person, it's going to become an annoyance, which will stack on another annoyance. And then guess what's going to happen next? The flash. So without ever thinking about that, I started to realize that this focus on love and what's right about people was the answer to the problem. Finally, victory. Finally, I found something that worked. After all these years of trying to do something and trying and failing, trying and failing, I had almost a zero failure rate.
Wow.
Because I was developing a new habit. I found a replacement for the anger, a replacement for that train track for the brain to go down, that it always went down, that my ancestors went down. And it was just, instead of being a genetic thing, it's a passed on behavior. It's a knowledge base more than anything else. So the knowledge and those traditions of the fathers that say, if you get annoyed, this is what you do. You get mad, or you plan to be mad. I'm going to be mad if that happens. And you're planning to be mad instead of saying, you know what? I'm just grateful. And you just find something to be grateful about, like I did with my father, about being grateful for the example of him dating my mother. That's the type of things you're looking for. So what's right about people? What can I love about them is the focus. And there's so many people out there. You'll bump into people. You'll always watch for that. Even the garbage man has something really good about him. He's taking your garbage away, for heaven's sakes. Be happy.
Yes. I think about that from time to time, even though I don't know where they put it all, but it's like, and I can't think on that too long, because then I'll go, what are we going to do? And then we can't solve every problem, because there's only, I can do some things, but I can't do everything.
That's right.
So then you ended up with a book. It also, how did it go from your game that you created and you have a book, The Roll of Love, and you didn't spell it ROLL like rolling the dice either. You spelled it ROLE. So tell us
Exactly.
how it went from the game to the book.
So it went from ROLL to ROLE because, and you'll notice again that there's only pictures on the die. There are
Mm-hmm.
absolutely no words. So just for an example, Danielle, if I said the word elephant, you're seeing an elephant in your mind. You're not seeing the words ELEPHANT. So I
Mm.
wanted this to be as simple as could be for me to be a memory hook. So I learned Japanese several years ago, many, many years ago, learned Japanese, and I needed those memory hooks to be able to learn a new language. And I thought,
Mm.
if I've got to make this a whole new language, this is a love language. I don't want that anger culture. I don't want that angry language. I don't
Yeah.
want those angry words anymore. I want a new language. So I've got to make some memory hooks to make it stick and make it hold on to it, hold on. And so I did that. And once I realized it was so fast, the transition, I couldn't believe it myself, Danielle. It was like 30 days of doing
Wow.
this. And then I felt like I'm not doing that anymore. I'm not getting angry anymore. I'm not doing that. And it's like I've developed a habit, moved
Mm-hmm.
away from it. Uh, I felt so good about it affecting me and what good effect that it had on me that I thought maybe this might work for other people. And so I started sharing it with other little families and started testing it with different people. Once I tested it with a family that had 5 children, the youngest was 4 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And one day he rolled physical touch, and he
Mm-hmm.
jumps up and down and pumps his fist and says, "Yes, yes, physical touch," and immediately starts beating up on his brother.
Oh, no, that's not loving.
So that was a perfect opportunity. The mother couldn't suppress the laughter long enough. I mean, she was having a hard time keeping the laughter back, but it actually turned out into a perfect teaching moment. And that's
Yeah.
really all we're looking for, is for teaching moments of that's a perfect time to now let's talk about this. Let's talk about what appropriate physical touch is. There was no better time than the time when he rolled the die and he jumped up and down about being excited about probably what his brothers had done to him.
Mm.
And that's probably how he felt loved, as I did. And I'm sure that's why when I took the test, physical touch was my language, because that's what I got when I was younger. That's what I thought love was. And so it was just a skewed um, uh, kind of a understanding of what love might be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even many years after I've taken that test, now my language is more the words, and I just light up. So that's another thing, that when you roll the die and you're doing that genre for the day, you're watching for people to light up. No,
Ah.
no longer do you have to say, "Excuse me, could we pause this relationship for a minute so we can take this survey so I know how to love you?"
That is just so ludicrous.
Well, yeah, yeah, and then what? I mean, and then they'll get to the point, well, I told you how to love me. Why aren't you loving me in that way? And you get this pity party, and you don't have to do that anymore. I found that this is all directional, and it's directional for every individual.
Mm.
They only have power or control, however they want to say it, to give it away and to respond when it comes their way.
Mm-hmm.
Really can't bid people to love us.
No.
It's either a manipulation, or then it feels maybe a duty bound type thing, and it's just not. It becomes more transactional. And even as Dr. Chapman was saying that, well, we people normally will give away what they like so that
Mm-hmm.
they'll get it back. So if and people are a little bit myopic in that way, that if they give away physical touch, they're hoping it's coming back, or they give away gifts, they're hoping that's coming back, and they can't see anything else as love.
Mm.
This changes the whole picture. After 30 days of giving this away, rolling the die and giving it away, your vision improves.
Mm,
You know all 5 love language, you become what I like to call a love language linguist.
yeah.
Sexy title, I know everybody wants that. The way you get to become a love language linguist is that you learn all of them. When you learn all of them, it's so much easier to see it when it's coming your way, and then you can respond appropriately. Even if it's not your primary love language, you say, oh, they're loving on me. It's not my primary love language, but I can respond. I can respond in kind and in love to them as well.
Yeah.
Just changes the whole dynamics there.
That's so cool. So you did this when you were single, and so you learned how to practice it yourself. And you mentioned one family. Does it, what are other places where this could work at? Could it work at work or in schools or anything like that? I mean, how else
That's
could this be applied?
That's a really good question, Danielle, and I'm testing it in schools right now. It can work in the workplace because the whole idea of this is just kindness, just genuine kindness, being authentic, being loving regardless of the circumstances, just helping people light up, helping uplift them, helping them have a better day, helping them be victorious
Mhm.
on that day. Find something about them that is just spectacular. I found in doing this that a lot of people don't even know what spectacular is about them, or they don't even recognize it. And when you iterate it, when you tell them or express to them what you love about them and how that quality that they have, they say, oh, I never thought of that. Thank you very much. And it just lights them up, lights their, it really, I love that. I love to get a following called the love starters, like fire starters, only the
Mm,
love starters.
yeah.
When you send it out, it's like that unfortunate slug in the shoulder when you were in the lunch line growing up, and you say pass it on. There, people will pass on love though the very same way. If they feel love, they're going to be kind to the next person.
Mhm.
Yes, if they feel anger and they send out anger, they get an immediate return on their investment. They're good. Somebody's going to be right angry right back at you, and yeah, who wants an investment like that?
Nobody's. So where can people get your book and where can people get this game that you created?
So they can get all of that on the website. My website is Roll of Love, again, ROLE, because it changes you inside. I did a play on words. ROLL is outside of you. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are outside of you. You want to change the circumstances within, change
Mhm.
your mindset. ROLE of love.com. They can find the book, they can find the journal, they can find the dice. The Audible is out there as well. So if they want the Audible, they'll need to actually go to Amazon and type in Paul Zolman. If you type in Roll of Love or Love Anything, you're going to get a million hits of love this, love that, love everything. And you're not going to find it. It's going to be a needle in the haystack, and
Yeah.
you're not going to find love if you do that.
Or you're gonna find too much love or the wrong
Uh,
kind of love or not what you're looking
that's
for. So
that's right, not what you're looking for.
wow, that's awesome. So is there anything you want to make sure that listeners know before we let them go?
One thing that has really struck me through the years, Danielle, is what we focus on. And I like to compare it to a magnifying glass.
Mm,
That that if you magnify what's wrong with people, guess what's going to happen? And you tell them what's wrong with them, it's coming right back to you. It's that boomerang effect again. But if you tell them what's right with you, you're putting money in a piggy bank. Maybe it'll come right back, maybe it won't, but someday it's coming back to you. And you're going to want that to come back. So just make that investment, magnify that which is good about other people, and
amen.
watch them light up. Let's light the
Amen.
world.
Amen. So how can people connect with you? You mentioned your website. Are you on any of the social medias or did you want to share a email address or anything with our listeners today?
So they can find it on Facebook or Instagram. It's just Roll of Love Dice
Okay.
is what I had to pick on that, or LinkedIn, Roll of Love Dice.
Ah, wonderful. This is real exciting. Thank you for sharing this, Paul. What a powerful way of changing our mindset. I think that we as human beings respond better, faster when we can turn it into fun. We can turn it into a game. You made it a game. And when we're told to change, we have a tendency to resist. But it's like, hey, let's play this game. I think that's just so beautiful. Thank you for creating it. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Danielle. It's been a pleasure. What a delight.
And our listeners, thank you for being with us today. And go to Paul's website and get yourself one of these games so you can learn how to do that in your life and in your family's life, and maybe even buy them for Christmas presents when that comes around. So until next time, mwah, I love you.